Hey everybody, welcome back to All Fiction is Fantasy. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today I am going to present my top 10 books of all time. Now, this is all genre fiction, so that means science fiction, horror, western, and so on. If I were to include non-genre fiction, more straight fiction, so I don't read a lot of straight fiction, but if I were to include my favorite non-genre books on this list, you might see things like The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Spark, The Last Picture Show and Terms of Endearment by Larry McMurtry, or something like Life After God by Douglas Coupland. So on this list, the oldest book is from 1935 and the newest book is from 1999. Okay, so let's get right to the top 10, and that is coming in at number 10 is from 1950 and from Ray Bradbury, and that is the Martian Chronicles. So the Martian Chronicles is such a fantastic work of science fiction, and one of the reasons why I think it's such a good work of science fiction is that it represents, or it has examples of science fiction's dark side. So Martian Chronicles, when people think of it, they often think of it in terms of kind of this ray punk or ray gun and rocket ship, kind of oh golly science fiction of the 1950s. But this thing is just overflowing with dark themes of suicide and humanity's madness. And this is a collection of short stories that were touched up over time by Ray Bradbury and compiled together to create a thematic collection that kind of reads like a novel, and it chronicles mankind's leaving the Earth and colonizing Mars and the kinds of things that happen to mankind on Mars. Ray Bradbury's sometimes eerie, sometimes poetic fantasy about the colonization of Mars is already a modern classic. His successful blending of fancy and satire, terror and compassion makes him one of today's most brilliant, imaginative, and important young writers. And that's a really good summation of why this book is in my top 10. This is one of my most read books. I've read it since I was probably in high school. I've read it multiple times. I return to it every few years or so. And I just absolutely love this book. This version is kind of falling apart. I would like to find maybe another nicer kind of vintage version to have and collect. I do have a hardback version that I use when I read, but yeah, just all kinds of great stories, very dark and kind of twisted, which is kind of Ray Bradbury's modus operandi. He likes to inject a lot of darkness into his novels. So that was number 10, Martian Chronicles. Number 9 is the newest on the list, and that is from 1999, and that is Michael Sisko's The Divinity Student. So The Divinity Student is one of the weirder books I've ever read. It is part of the new weird genre, the school of fiction that grew out of things like Algernon Blackwood, and then before that, Lord Dunsany, Arthur Machen, and then on to people like H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard. And then kind of the new weird was kind of ushered in by authors and editors like Jeff Vandermeer. And Michael Sisko was one of the first authors of the new weird. He's continuing to write fiction today. He just put out a new novel this year. But The Divinity Student, his very first novel, is actually my favorite. And I don't think he's quite reached this height. Maybe I almost chose The Great Lover, which is kind of the end point of his first era. And The Great Lover incorporates a lot of the things from his earliest novels, like The Divinity Student, The Narrator, The Traitor, and what was the other one? My mind just completely blanked, but The Great Lover was kind of the culmination of all of the stuff he worked towards. But I think The Divinity Student stands kind of head and shoulders above everything else he has written. It's so bizarre and otherworldly and dreamlike This is a book all about a divinity student who actually has his guts. He dies at the beginning of the book, and he has all of his innards, all of his guts ripped out of his body. And these priest type characters, they stuff his skin, his body, full of the pages of discarded texts. And then they send him to this mythical city where he is charged with discovering new words and new definitions for new words. And in this city, he has all of these bizarre adventures, and weird things happen to him as he is discovering his new life as this word sleuth, this word detective. This is an absolutely brilliantly written novel. The prose is super strong, poetic. It's dreamlike, it's otherworldly, and this is, for me, kind of just the best of the new weird. Okay, coming in at number 8 from 1963 is an example of pastoral science fiction. If I don't know if John Steinbeck wrote science fiction, you might get something like Clifford D. Simak's Way Station. He was the only Earthman allowed to communicate with the intergalactic universe, and the only chance to maintain peace on Earth was through his way station. So way station is all about this guy who is he's a caretaker of this intergalactic way station on Earth, where different aliens and beings from other planets and other solar systems and other galaxies and dimensions, if they need to visit Earth or on their way to another place, they can stop off at the Earth way station. And his name was Enoch Wallace. Enoch Wallace looked like any other man on Earth, except that time, about 100 years had passed, and he had shown no signs of aging. His house was invulnerable against destruction from any weapon known to man. In his family cemetery, a tombstone inscribed in an unknown language guarded the grave of an alien horror. For years, no one had invaded the solitude of his lonely farm. But now the watchers on Earth were closing in on him, determined to solve the mystery of who or what it was that went under the name of Enoch Wallace, man, magician, or non-human, creature from another planet. So the book starts off kind of pastoral. You're with Enoch Wallace, and then his life is kind of invaded by almost like these men in black or these X-Files spooks who are investigating the strangeness that goes on around Enoch Wallace and then how that affects his life. Very good book, very quick reading. Clifford D. Simak was a great author, especially in this really early era of science fiction. I think his prose is quite good, and this is by far the best thing I have read from Clifford D. Simak. I guess maybe not by far, maybe not head and shoulders over City. City almost made this list instead of Way Station, but Way Station is the one that I return to most often, and it is the one that I get the most kind of emotional connection to. So that was Way Station by Clifford D. Simak. Okay, coming in at number 7 from 1970, and this is probably the most subversive novel on this list, and that is J.G. Ballard's The Atrocity Expedition. This novel is so subversive that copies of the first printing were actually destroyed in the UK because it was considered to be so transgressive and kind of so revolting in a way. But this is a collection of stories and flash fiction, very short fiction. If J.G. Ballard were writing today, this might be a hypertext novel. I think J.G. Ballard kind of popularized the idea of a hypertext novel with this work. So there are all these little flash fiction, all these little tiny one-paragraph stories in this book. And you really can start reading this book on any page and just kind of go with it as you want to go. This book is kind of represents Ballard at his most subversive and kind of collects all of his subversive and transgressive ideas. His ideas about the celebrity politician, about car crashes and car safety, his infatuation with American and American celebrity, and just all of this very, very modern world. J.G. Ballard was absolutely infatuated, obsessed with American culture. So he was from the UK, but I think he understood American society better than any other author that I have ever read. J.G. Ballard started in his early career with writing science fiction. He ended his career with writing straight fiction. And in between those two bookends of his incredible writing career, he wrote some of the most subversive, most dangerous fiction ever written. And Atrocity Expedition is one of those books. For instance, you have stories called Why I Want to Fuck Ronald Reagan, or The Assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, considered as a downhill motor race. And I want to read just a little bit of that. The beginning here is so incredible. Oswald was the starter. From his window above the track, he opened the race by firing the starting gun. It is believed that the first shot was not properly heard by all the drivers. In the following confusion, Oswald fired the gun 2 more times, but the race was already underway. Kennedy got off to a bad start. Jesus Christ. Yeah, that's the kind of work this is, the terminal zone. He lay on the sand with a rusty bicycle wheel. Now and then, he would cover some of the spokes with sand, neutralizing the radial geometry. The rim interested him. Hidden behind a dune, the hut no longer seemed a part of this world. The sky remained constant, the warm air touching the shreds of test papers sticking up from the sand. He continued to examine the wheel. Nothing happened. This book is incredible. If you've never read J.G. Ballard, I highly recommend him. I am going to be doing at least one kind of big video on J.G. Ballard because he's pretty incredible. But okay, so coming in at number 6 is from 1980, and that is the Ninth Configuration, written by William Peter Blatty. Of course, William Peter Blatty, famous for The Exorcist and Legion, Exorcist Part 3. This is Part 2 of that trilogy, the Ninth Configuration, but it is not a horror novel. This is also sometimes known as Twinkle, Twinkle, Killer Kane. And this edition from Centipede Press includes both Twinkle, Twinkle, Killer Kane and the reworked version, Ninth Configuration, which is the version that I prefer. It also has an incredible introduction by Mark Kermode. Mark Kermode is kind of an expert on William Peter Blatty. So Mark Kermode is a film critic from the UK. And he loves Blatty. He loves The Exorcist, and and always writes interesting things about about William Peter Blatty. So the Ninth Configuration is a theological mystery, I think you could say. It is about this group of military soldiers and ex-military personnel who live in this mansion, and they are undergoing some kind of psychiatric treatment at this mansion. And each one of them has a different kind of mental conflict that they are dealing with. And it's all about this one inmate who is struggling with the idea of going into outer space. He was an astronaut, and he didn't want to go to outer space. He had this mental breakdown on the launching pad, and he was deathly afraid of being alone in space, because if you are alone in space on your own, you are truly alone. And he had this existential crisis, and this crisis about perhaps God not existing. And this is a work, I would say, the Ninth Configuration, even more than The Exorcist and Legion, is kind of a work of Christian apologetics. And in this trilogy of faith, The Exorcist, Ninth Configuration, and Legion, Blatty is presenting his kind of ideas of Christian apologetics. He was a devout Catholic. But the Ninth Configuration is fantastic. It is super funny. It is hilarious. Blatty was a great writer of comedy, and there are some really funny lines in the Ninth Configuration. Okay, so coming in at number 5, and that is from 1956, and that is Alfred Bester's The Stars, My Destination. Ground Zero for Cyberpunk from 1956, almost 30 years before Neuromancer. This book is just fantastic. It's about this rough and just kind of grimy anti-hero named Goalie Foil, who is on a mission of revenge. It includes all of the things that would eventually become cyberpunk. We have these cybernetics, a bullet time, these huge multinational global conglomerations, all of these things vying for power, all of this weirdness, this strange technology, tattoos, and all kinds of just absolutely bizarre and wild things. This book is overflowing with style. The fact that it was written in 1956 just always kind of blows my mind because of how much style it has, and it doesn't feel like something from 1956. This was a golden age, a time of high adventure, rich living, and hard dying, but nobody thought so. This was a future of fortune and theft, pillage and rapine, culture and vice, but nobody admitted it. This was an age of extremes, a fascinating century of freaks, but nobody loved it. All the inhabitable worlds of the solar system were occupied, 3 planets and 8 satellites and 11 million people swarmed in one of the most exciting ages ever known. Yet minds still yearn for other times, as always. The solar system seethed with activity, fighting, feeding, and breeding, learning the new technologies that spewed forth almost before the old had been mastered, girding itself for the first exploration of the far stars in deep space. But yeah, this book is just fantastic. Towards the end of the book, we go into these weird worlds where the lead character is experiencing this kind of bizarre reality, and the words on the page reflect that reality, that weird kind of subliminal or liminal space that he is living through. But yeah, this is just a fantastic novel. Education none, skills none, merits none, recommendations none. So read Goalie Foil's Merchant Marine card. But Goalie has managed to survive for 170 days in an airless purgatory of deep space and to escape to Terra with a murderous grudge and a secret that could change the course of history. If you've never read The Star's My Destination or Alfred Bester, I highly recommend both. And coming in at number 4, and this is the oldest book on the list from 1935, and that is The Circus of Dr. Lao from Charles G. Finney. One of the most remarkable fantasy classics of all time. Yes, I do agree. Do you dare to enter the Circus of Dr. Lao? Amazing! See the werewolf turn into the real flesh and blood woman right before your eyes. Fantastic. See the bloody sacrifice of one living virgin to a pagan god. You yourself select the lucky little lady. Eerie, terrifying, stupendous, the most amazing circus the world has ever known. Plus thousands more, chimeras, unicorns, genuine Greek satyrs. Spellbinding, see the famous Gorgon, one look and she can turn you to stone. Just imagine the amazement of the 3 sailors who tried to rape her. The Circus of Dr. Lao. This book from 1935 is incredibly subversive and progressive. I would love to know what people thought of this book in 1935. It is one of the most challenging and bizarre and just kind of confrontational genre books I've ever read. It's so oddly structured as well. It just starts with this circus coming into town. The people go to the circus and it tells you what the people are seeing and what the various people are doing as they experience the circus and the freak show of Dr. Lao. And it ends kind of on this weird note, but then we get this this kind of appendices at the back called the catalog. And this is an explanation of the obvious, which must be read to be appreciated. And here we go through all of the various characters, and it kind of recontextualizes what you just read and sheds light and reveals things about the characters and the various creatures that were in the Circus of Dr. Lao. It's very weird. I've never read another book quite like the Circus of Dr. Lao. It is one of the most bizarre, kind of dark and twisted books I have ever read. But it is fantastic. I absolutely love this book, and I am due for a reread of The Circus of Dr. Lao. And coming in at 1940, number 3 now from 1944. And this is the only book that's ever made me cry in public. And that is Olaf Stapledon's Sirius. Let's read about Sirius here. Sirius is a tale of immense and tragic pathos in which Olaf Stapledon evokes the terrible loneliness of a dog born with the mind of a man. Thomas Trelawne's life work was to explore the possibilities of producing a superhuman by experimenting with hormone injections into various mammals. Sirius himself is infinitely the most successful of these trials. He is the only viable puppy born with the brain capacity of a human being, but he still has the senses and instincts of the physique of a dog. Born at the same time as Plaxi, Thomas's youngest daughter, the child and puppy are brought up together, share the same lessons, and develop an intense understanding of one another's humanness and dogness. So if you've ever wondered what something like Old Yeller or Where the Red Fern Grows might be like if it was a science fiction novel, Sirius might provide an answer for that. It is an incredibly sad book. Sirius, he has the intelligence and the desires and the creative drive of a human, but he's in a dog's body and he's unable to fulfill his creative urges because he wants to paint, but he can't hold a paintbrush because he has paws instead of hands. The scene that really brought me to that emotional breaking point was a scene where he goes to church and experiences religion, a human religion through the eyes of a dog. And it's intensely emotional. Olaf Stapledon himself was a humanist, and he actually had some correspondence with C.S. Lewis where they discussed religion and humanism and atheism. And just the fact that Olaf Stapledon could view religion in this way in this book through the eyes of a dog, of Sirius, of this intelligent dog, it really spoke to me. And this book is incredibly sad and lovely and just overflowing with emotion. And I absolutely love it. Stapledon was such a fantastic author, very bold, very unique. But yeah, that is Sirius by Olaf Stapledon. And coming in at number 2 is from 1975. And that is Dahlgren by Samuel R. Delany. Another kind of subversive book, another transgressive book, another book just kind of overflowing with very explicit sex, tons of sex. I think there's like a 20-page stretch of, there's a stretch of 20 pages where just a bunch of characters just lay around and screw each other. But let's read out Dahlgren a little bit. The sun has grown deadly. The world has gone mad. Society has perished. Savagery rules over all. All that was known is over. All that was familiar is strange and terrible. Today and yesterday collide with tomorrow. In these dying days of Earth, a young drifter enters the city. So Dahlgren is all about this city that has been cut off from the rest of the world because of some localized apocalypse. And different kinds of artists and rejects and outsiders, they are drawn to the city and they move into this lawless city that is this kind of anarchist dream of existence. And they live their lives in this city. And there's, it explores homosexuality. It explores race and racism. Samuel R. Delany, of course, a gay black man writing science fiction starting in the early days of the 1950s. So he had to deal with a lot of discrimination. But it's all about this kid called Kid. And he's a poet, and he is kind of an avatar for Delany. And Kid in this book is trying to write a collection of poetry and have it published. And it's all about just the people he meets, the relationships that he has in this weird otherworldly city where the apocalypse might have happened. There is a section in this book. So I think there's 5 different sections. Prism, Mirror, Lens, The Ruins of Morning, House of the Axe, In Time of Plague, Creatures of Light and Darkness, Palimpsest, and the Anathemata, a Plague Journal. And House of the Axe is one of the greatest works of fiction I have ever read. This one section is just so good. It is so haunting. The first time I read this book was about 12 years ago, I think. And I am constantly thinking of House of the Axe. The book kind of falls in on itself. It kind of twists like some kind of weird Mobius strip where we end up with these double pages of text here. And we start to realize that what we are reading might be a journal of a character, or different characters are writing in the margins of a journal. So this book is cyclical in nature. It begins in the middle of a sentence. So we have to wound the autumnal city, and then it ends with the beginning of that sentence. But I still hear them walking in the trees, not speaking, waiting here, away from the terrifying weaponry of the halls of vapor and light beyond Holland and into the hills. I have come to wound the autumnal city. And yeah, it's a bizarre book. Trying to decipher its meaning could probably take an entire lifetime. But for me, it's just meant to be experienced on a moment by moment basis. And there are so many fascinating characters and so many great complex relationships and scenarios and situations that I just can't help but absolutely love Dahlgren. I've read this book about 5 times. And coming in at number 1 is from 1985, and that is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. I love Larry McMurtry. I love Lonesome Dove. This is the American Lord of the Rings, I guess you could say, a huge, sprawling adventure epic about some cowboys taking a herd across the United States into Montana. And this is a love story, an adventure, and an epic of the frontier. Larry McMurtry's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, Lonesome Dove, the 3rd book in the Lonesome Dove tetralogy. This was the first published, but then he went on to write 3 others, and all 3 of the others are fantastic as well. But is the grandest novel ever written about the last defiant wilderness of America. Journey to the dusty little Texas town of Lonesome Dove and meet an unforgettable assortment of heroes and outlaws, whores and ladies, Indians and settlers. Richly authentic, beautifully written, always dramatic, Lonesome Dove is a book to make us laugh, weep, dream, and remember. This book has some of the most memorable characters I've ever met in a novel. Larry McMurtry writes women characters just so well. His women characters are so complex and just kind of overflowing with humanity. And I love everything about this book. It is tragic. There are parts that are scary and incredibly violent and dark and twisted. There is levity. There is humor. Just so much. This book kind of encapsulates everything that I love about adventure fiction and adventure movies and just adventure in general. It's all here within these 800 or so pages. This is one of the biggest novels I've ever read, and I've read this about 3 times, and I do want to reread it soon. So, all right, you guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed that top 10. All kinds of different books here. These are all of my favorite genre books, but there are so many books that I love, and this list was very, very difficult to put together. But let me know what some of your favorite books are, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.